Today, former President Jimmy Carter said he thinks the president would deserve the Nobel Prize if he manages, that's a big if, he's really qualifying this, to get the North Koreans to give up their nukes. But is President Trump really thinking about canceling the meeting, or is it possible that he's just being a showman and amping up the drama? Let me go to my military-grade party panel tonight. She's an editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Katie Pavlich is here. He is a spokesperson at Young Voices and host of the podcast Beltway Panthers. It's Stephen Kent, and he is the host of You're Welcome. That's a podcast and author of the book, Dear Reader, the Unauthorized Autobiography of Kim Jong-il. He's got a license to ill. Michael Malice is back, our resident actual North Korea expert.
I'm no Mike Baker.
Come on,
someone
man.
just hit me with a dead cat, apparently.
I don't think he was talking about you.
That's true.
I want to read you Jimmy Carter's quote because I think I want to get your feeling on this.
Yeah.
He's talking about if they're under constant belief that the United States wants to attack them, meaning North Korea, even using nuclear weapons, and that we are destroying their economy, and they know that they're starving to death primarily because the United States withholds food aid, for instance, just giving them surplus food that we can't ever use. I can understand how they feel.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background about Jimmy Carter, North Korea. He went there in 1994 and tried to broker a deal with the great leader Kim Il-sung. And 5 years ago today, I posted a quote from North Korean propaganda about their meeting. And this is what they said. Jimmy Carter said, quote, President Kim Il-sung is a person in whom George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln, those popular three presidents of the United States early in its history, are put together. So that actually did not happen. But the point is, North Korea withheld food from getting to its citizens in the 90s because Kim Jong-il specifically said, if we allow the UN to feed the population, the government will be superfluous. So that's absolutely not true that they would be willing to accept food. And if they did accept food, they would claim it's coming from the leader. So he's false in that regard. It's absolutely true that they think we're going to invade at any minute.
Yes.
Because you see people all over the news right now blatantly saying, John Bolton had an editorial in the Wall Street Journal that even if South Korea is against it, we have the unilateral right to strike if they develop nuclear capabilities. And when President Bush said the axis of evil is Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, this is clearly a kill list of the three countries he wanted to take out. So they are right to be afraid. And again, if most people in this country don't trust themselves to disarm and give up their guns and trust the federal government, why would the North Korean government think any differently?
And they have gotten so many resources over the years that they could have used to feed their people.
Of course.
I mean, you don't build a multi-billion-dollar nuclear weapons program unless you have money.
And lastly, they have something called Sungbun, and they use food as a mechanism of social control, so that the more loyal you are to the government, the more likely you are to receive food.
And we're going to talk about that same thing happening in Venezuela.
Yes.
But I want to get back here because we've heard a lot about the Libyan model, and it was something that John Bolton said in regards to denuclearizing North Korea, which essentially can be by force, with a very sad ending for the leader of either Libya or North Korea. It wasn't just something that John Bolton said offhandedly months ago in an interview. This is now something that Vice President Pence has legitimized by using the same term. So do you think that we are on a march to war if, in fact, the meeting doesn't take place?
I don't think we're on a march to war, but I'm just stunned that Mike Pence then echoed that comment from John Bolton, because that seemed incredibly ill-advised. They need to keep that comment and John Bolton off television for the next 3 weeks if they're going to make this meeting happen. He instills a sense of distrust with the North Korean regime, and Michael's absolutely right when he mentioned, like trying to step away from their guns, being their WMDs. Like, they're like the cultists at Waco. Like, you cannot threaten them in this way. Their weapons are the only thing that make them feel secure. So this march towards total denuclearization or else is not going to work in this case. We need to be a little bit more gentle here.
I was talking to Gordon Chang a few weeks ago, and he said they still have a conventional military, which is actually a bigger practical threat to the region, and it's much easier for them to go ahead and bomb South Korea. Right. They don't have to use nukes in order to inflict a lot of damage. So even if you take their nuclear program away, they still have the ability to defend themselves.
Right, that's always been the concern, that they'll use artillery power against Seoul, South Korea, which is right there across the border. All this conversation that we just had goes back to why this has never worked out and why every administration has had a failure when it comes to reining in North Korea's program. They are so far apart, and although in the last couple of months We've seen things come together on the surface when it comes to the principles of what the North Koreans are willing to do, which is not giving up their nuclear arms. The negotiation now is about what denuclearization actually means and what the United States requires, which is complete denuclearization of the peninsula. And then, of course, there's China, which is playing a role in saying, well, you can't ask North Korea to completely give up their nukes. However, we think that they should be limited in their capacity. And by the way, we don't want any of the fallout when it comes to the regime collapsing.
China wants control, and they want North Korea to be dependent. And they also want to have as much influence as possible on the Korean peninsula. My question is, would South Korea, and we're running out of time, so this has to be a quick answer, would South Korea rather work with the United States in resolving this situation?
I think ultimately, yes. I mean, the United States is an ally. We're doing military exercises. The United States has repeatedly said we are not taking illegal military exercises off the table in exchange for the denuclearization of North Korea. But again, the gap here is very wide, and it feels like we're back to the beginning of why this hasn't worked out.
Last word, we've 5 seconds.
Katie gets it perfectly.
Oh, very good, Michael Malice, taking the baton and doing it very classily. The panel returns a little bit later, because how could they not? Plus, the plot thickens in the White House. Republican lawmakers now calling for a second special counsel to investigate the possibility the feds had politically motivated spies in the Trump campaign, and now the president has weighed in. I'll tell you what he said. Chris Starwell joins me next for Reaction. Great to see me. Woo! That was a swoop. How long can Nicolas Maduro possibly hang on to power? His people are starving. His economy is ruined. The murder rate is one of the highest in the world, and all indicators suggest things are only going to get worse. So what can we do to fix this failed socialist experiment before it turns into another Somalia? The party panel is back. Katie Pavlich, Stephen Kent, and Michael Malice. Katie, I don't think this is the worst case scenario. I don't think this is a black swan country undergoing some bad luck. I think this is the natural ultimate end of socialism and communism. What do you think? Yeah,
well, people will argue, this isn't real socialism or this isn't real communism. No, this is what it is. In 1999, Venezuela decided to go from more of a free market system to a socialist country to spend more money on welfare. This is exactly what we've seen as a result of that. Now, Maduro is out there this week on video in this bizarre way, waving to crowds that don't exist to applaud him on his re-election by 70%. The United States has condemned the election results, and the question is, where do we go from here, not only just in Venezuela, but as the United States, because there are American interests there and there are foreign policy implications of the regime collapsing. The Venezuelans are fleeing in large numbers. As you mentioned in your monologue, the most important people in the country who are, doctors, nurses, are leaving, but regular people are getting out because they are so desperate.
Those who can afford to are getting on buses and getting out of the country.
Utopia that is now existing in Venezuela is a result of these principles, not a mistake.
Mouse?
What I would like to see happen, because there's only so much we can do vis-a-vis Venezuela, every politician who was a segregationist racist had to disavow, had to turn their backs, and had to be publicly humiliated, and we had to be skeptical of them for decades. So why are Michael Moore, Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, all the people who said Venezuela is a great thing, a great experiment, why are they not run out of the public square and throwing tomatoes everywhere they go? You have children bleeding to death in hospital beds. You have people starving. Again, they shoot into crowds when people try to protest. To have anyone who's an apologist for this not take responsibility for it and still be given a microphone, I think, is disgraceful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's only getting worse and worse and worse. It's actually getting exponentially worse as inflation rises, and the poorest people there are the ones who can't afford to feed their kids. They never had to treat malnutrition 5 years ago, and now that condition has gone up 100-fold in hospitals that literally have no doctors. So what do we do? Do we do anything as the United States?
Well, there's, again, limited tools in our toolkit to deal with this particular situation. We're not going to invade Venezuela.
Nor should we.
Well, we shouldn't. And sanctions are something that we have to be delicate with as well, because we want to target the elite in that country who are abusing and starving their people without then actually hurting the people who live in that country and are not able to leave. Like we were mentioning, the doctors and everyone who are able to flee. The oil industry in that country runs basically the only leftover economy that's there, but it only benefits the wealthy.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's what they did. I mean, it is a state run industry. They've got so much oil, which was great, and they were very profitable when oil prices were high, but when they tanked.
This is Atlas Shrugged come to life. This is exactly the product of Atlas Shrugged. Take a successful business, have the government running, and then see how long it takes for people to be starving and eating animals.
And, you know, when Atlas shrugs, that's when the people who were holding up the economy, they leave. They're exhausted.
And it's the poor and the weak who are the first to suffer.
That's absolutely right, and suffer the longest. Well, back here at home, I mean, we're really suffering, right? Because House Speaker Paul Rhino, is facing renewed pressure to step down from his perch before his term ends. The administration may be nudging the effort along. White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney reportedly said he has spoken with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy about ousting Ryan, adding, quote, "Palace intrigue. Wouldn't it be great to force a Democrat running in a tight race to have to put up or shut up about voting for Nancy Pelosi 8 weeks before an election? That's a really, really good vote for us to force if we can figure out how to do it." Now, Mulvaney says he is supportive of the speaker, right? And McCarthy says he's never even talked with Mulvaney about it. So, should House Republicans plan a mutiny? Katie?
We always hear word of a mutiny whenever there's any kind of speaker's race. Jim Jordan, there was 100 conservatives that came out and signed a letter saying they want him to run for speaker. Paul Ryan will likely finish out his term as the Speaker of the House.
He's not going to get pushed out of the way?
You know, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, you know, as they say in Washington, D.C., if you want a friend, get a dog. And although Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan have been very close for the last couple of years, not only just in leadership as Paul Ryan came up through the ranks in the House on the Ways and Means Committee, I doubt that McCarthy's going to actually push Paul Ryan out.
Will Jim Jordan get the job?
No, I mean, money talks. Paul Ryan brought in $11.9 million just in the first quarter for Republicans.
Still around.
So yeah, put up or shut up everybody else who wants that job. They're not going to move him out as long as they need to raise money for these midterm elections, which are going to be contentious. I also would like to see Paul Ryan finish out this job because we need him to finish and have a legitimate, open run election. Kevin McCarthy cannot be coordinated for this. Nobody really wants him in the Republican base.
Is there a benefit to chaos?
No.
Well, I mean, look at the last Republican speakers. You have the ambassador of the Vatican's wife. You have this lobster who's selling marijuana. Dennis Hastert, I can't even discuss him on air. And now we have the guy who Mitt Romney made his beta. So this is just quite a cast of characters and losers.
He is his Robin.
Yes.
Yeah, he really is. I love Paul Rhino. I love the term Paul Rhino. I think Paul Ryan has completely turned his back on his principles.
But in 2012, Romney needed to play the base, and he chose Ryan. And that's how far the Republican Party has gone to the right, where even Ryan is regarded as on the left now.
Ryan was slapping the base and really stinking up the joint. You know, I want to thank you all for being here because you're good friends, you are allies of freedom, and you're delightful people. So
thank you for having us.
Michael Stephen, my freedoms and my feels right here on Katie Pavlich. Thank you all.